Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, your host, welcoming you to another weekly conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Amy Parks. Amy has written both middle grade and young adult novels, and you might recognize her titles like Leah and Beckett's Abracadabra, The Quantum Weirdness of the Almost Kiss, Summer of Brave, and her newest title we're talking about today, Averil Offline, just released in February of 2024 and focusing on really important topics for our times like girls who code, digital privacy, and standing up for who you are. Amy, welcome to the Get Literate it's my other podcast. Welcome to the Kid Lit Love podcast. So glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
So I always start out the episodes with a bit of introduction, but I feel like I want to do it differently with you because I just fell in love with the bio that you have, both on the back cover of your books as well as on your website. So I wanted to read it. I know it is going to make people smile, and then I'll kick it over to you to fill in the gaps and say a little bit more. Okay, here we go. Amy Parks is a professor of elementary education at Michigan State University, where she helps future teachers recover from the trauma inflicted on them by years of school mathematics. At night, she writes stories about smart girls falling for feminist boys in quirky Midwestern settings, and likes using One Direction lyrics as the inspiration for entire novels. That is just the best bio I have read. I
you need to know about me.
So give us a little bit more. Now that we have that big picture, tell us about you and the books that you write.
Sure. So all of the books I write are about STEM girls, and that is because I spend a lot of my time in the math ed world, and I am not someone who grew up thinking of herself as a math person. I thought of myself as a writer. And it was really when I became an elementary school teacher that I realized like mathematics could also be creative and it could also have conversations and it could also be welcoming to girls. And that's sort of when my professional life started to shift. So when I wanted to write children's books, I really wanted to make a space for girls who are like both girly and interested in things like romance, but who are also interested in things like math and coding and science.
Yeah, which I loved. I fell in love with the characters in the book. I especially fell in love with Averil, and I could see, she's very smart, a girl who can code, but someone who isn't necessarily living up to that on the outside, which was a really just a really real thing, I think, that happens. So for those that didn't grab Averil Offline right when it came out, tell us a little bit about the overview of that novel, and then we can dive into some of the specifics.
Sure. So when I was growing up, I really loved E.L. Konigsberg's book, The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Baisley Frankweiler. And in that book, two kids run away to the New York Metropolitan Museum and they live there for a week and they like sleep in the exhibits and they take baths in the fountains and they eat out of vending machines. And I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I grew up on college campuses. We lived right next door to one. And so I'd always thought it would be really great to sort of write an updated version where kids ran away to like live on a college campus for a period of time. But when I started playing with the story, I realized that like writing that today, you had to contend with cell phones and the way like parents are constantly in contact with their kids and
Yeah.
like watching where they go. And so I started to think, okay, that could actually be like a theme that structures this like sort of happy little adventure that I wanted to write. And I feel like the two ideas actually worked really well together.
Yeah, they definitely did. And, I think the book is perfect for the time we're in right now. I mean, in the story, both Averil and her new friend Max are ruled essentially by this app called Ruby Slippers, which is a parental kind of surveillance slash control app that allows them to keep track of their child and make sure they're safe and all the things that parents want to do. But it at one point, it potentially could cross a line into a whole nother realm of surveillance and digital privacy. And these two kids have decided that I've had enough. I've had enough and I want to do something about it, which then sent them on that adventure, as you mentioned. And even though Ruby Slippers might not be a real app, Life 360 is, and
Yeah,
other
sure
apps
is.
like it are out there. And I have teenagers. They're a little older now. My son is 19. I have twins that are going to be 17 in just a week or so. And I don't have that app. I have some of my own concerns of what that meant if I wanted to download that app, but I understand parents who do. And I think it just brings up so many issues of what is done in the realm of just keeping my kids safe versus what's too much and how does it make the child feel at the same.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think about that a lot. I also have kids. With how does it make the child feel, right? And I think that that kind of surveillance not only can feel like an invasion of privacy, but also sort of communicates that like the world is an incredibly dangerous place and that parents don't like trust their children to keep them safe. And like it also means like kids don't like get to make choices about like what they tell their parents about their day because their parents have already like seen so many parts. Oh, what were you doing here? And that sort of thing. So I think like in terms of like building a relationship with your kids, um, that kind of electronic surveillance actually shuts down opportunities for like openness and sharing and that sort of thing. So yeah, I am, I guess, skeptical of those kinds of privacy apps.
Yeah, especially when, and this is the hard part for me as a book podcaster is to say enough without saying too much because I don't want to reveal some of the unexpected
Yeah.
surprises that come in the book, other than, there does come a point where it seems like the app is going to cross a very big line. Um, the kids have decided they have enough and they go off on this adventure to try to find the creator because they think if we could just explain what's going on. Our parents don't seem to get it, but if we can just explain to this developer of the app, then we can get them to stop and we can get a little bit of our life back.
Yeah.
And on that journey, they end up uncovering so much. And this is where I think another layer of the book just got so interesting of, you talk about having strong, smart girl characters, and Avril is all of those things, doesn't always show it on the outside or isn't the one who's quick to share that with everyone else. And then in the process ends up learning things about the creator of Ruby Slippers that make her question things and wonder about things and how honest is everybody and why do we kind of hide behind certain things. There are just so many really great themes here that I think a reader today, whether you are a child or a parent, could definitely find themselves just thinking about for a while.
Yeah, when I wrote the first draft, my agent and my editor both thought that the end should be different. That they thought the end should be, the kids like blow up this app and it disappears and no one uses it ever again. Um, and I see how like as a book, like that's an exciting ending. But I was really committed to sort of having this conversation like attached to our real world, right? Like
Yeah.
these, like whatever the technological advances, it doesn't matter. It's not going away. Once it's here, it's here. And so like our job is to figure out how to live with it as human beings, like whether it is artificial intelligence or tracking apps or whatever. The solution can't be, well, we're just going to make it disappear because it's not going to. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely my goal to like encourage those conversations about how we're using the tools we have because we have more and more all the time.
Right. And like you said, they're not going away. I
Mm-mm.
respectfully disagree with the people who said the end, because I wondered, as I read it, I thought, how is this going to play down? Are the kids going to win, or what's going to happen? And why I loved it, both as a reader and I think as a parent too, is that the resolution didn't come from the app itself. The resolution came in the conversations that emerged, and the inner strength and the inner feelings and the bravery and the courage to have those conversations and to trust and make choices, which I think is the best way to end a book, especially one with those concerns, with questions about relationships. I thought the ending was exactly as it should be. So
Nice.
without actually giving it away, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, I suppose I gave some things away, but
No, you didn't. You didn't. I think we were strategic enough to not quite go there. One of the things I loved about Avril, and I know she is definitely she has a math mind, she's a brilliant coder, and she loves all the things, but she also loves what I love, which is her notebook.
mm,
I just adored this part about her. That notebook goes wherever she goes, just like my notebook always went wherever I went. Everything went in it, things to remember, things that happened, her brainstorming, her tinkering, all of the things. And I actually have a part of the book. I love collecting quotes from books.
oh,
And the one that really jumped out at me because of my own love of notebooking was this one line that said, "The notebook collected stray thoughts so I could move on." And that is exactly what my notebook does. Everything gets off of my mind, off of my heart, onto the page so that I can just be a little bit better
yeah.
than I was before. Is that something that you always appreciated? Did you want to balance her math brain with her ELA brain? Like where did the notebook come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who like sits at that border between like literacy and math, like
Yeah,
literally in my job, I teach math methods and I teach children's literature. Like it doesn't feel as oppositional to me as I think a lot of people make it. Like you are a math person or you're a literacy person. Like it's never felt to me like you had to be one or the other. So certainly, like yes, it didn't feel weird to me that like a STEM character would have this notebook. But the other thing I think is that like as we think about technology in our lives, I think going back to these old material forms is meaningful, right? To like write in a notebook instead of write on your notes app or whatever. And especially around privacy concerns, that like we don't know who's accessing all of our digital space, but like a journal or a notebook can feel like ours in a different way, I feel like. And I don't, and it makes my brain think differently when I'm writing in a notebook. Like if I get stuck when I'm writing a story, which I compose on computers, I often then jump to my notebook, which feels, I don't know, like a freer space for me.
yeah. Well, you're talking to a fellow notebooker, so I absolutely understand everything you've said and then some. I'm the kid who used to walk around with a notebook to the adult that still walks with a notebook, or one tucked in her purse or somewhere, because you never know. You never know, and you need to capture something, and that mood strikes. And I love how she used that notebook in different purposes across the book, helping her in so many different ways, but also kind of bringing to light the fact that we are talking about digital privacy and these digital apps, but there is one point in the book where mom takes a peek at that notebook.
Yeah, and that's pretty early, so I don't think that's a spoiler.
That's why I allowed
I think it's
myself to
actually
say
right
it.
on the back of the book.
Yeah. But it's such an important moment because in that moment, Averil's like, well, wait a minute. One app was portrayed as I need to keep track of you to keep you safe because I love you. But what is this? This is my notebook. These are my thoughts. What is the difference? And that was really interesting to me too, both as someone who notebooks and thought, oh no, what if someone actually got privy to my innermost thoughts that were on the page? There's literally a sticky note on my morning page notebook that says, read at your own risk. There's a lot of emotion in there. But then also as a parent thinking of, what rights do we have to keep kids safe? And then where does that line, get blurry, and how would it make a child feel? So that was such an important part of the book for me as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, when I'm writing the book, I'm writing it for kids from their perspective, but like I am now a parent, so I can't help but think that way too. And it can be so tempting as a parent, right? Like teens stop talking
Yeah.
to us. We want to know what's going on with them. Um, if you see a notebook of theirs, it can be hard not to just open it up and see what's going on, right? But to recognize that even if your child never finds out, that is an invasion of their privacy. Like you don't have a right to that information because you are their parent. Um, I think that's a really important thing for us to think about. We're so concerned with safety now, as we should be in many ways, that I think we have stopped asking ourselves what we don't have a right to know or to do to children in the like goal of keeping them safe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this, I think the whole idea of parenting is just, what do I do? What do I do? Tried it out. Where do I cross the line? Where don't I?
Hmm.
But I could easily see, I know kids are going to read this and they're just going to feel an instant kind of kinship. Like, oh my gosh, it's not Ruby Slippers, but yeah, my parents know this. Or, if you have an iPhone, pretty much anybody can find anybody. Or
Yep.
if you're on Snapchat, you might be on a
Yep.
map, right? There are
Yep.
so many ways that we can be tracked that way. But I also see this as a really wonderful book for a book club for parents and teachers, like adults reading this to really dive into it too. So I know this is a kid lit podcast and we're saying it's a middle grade novel, but I personally think it's a novel for everyone because of these themes that are inside.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that's true about kidlit in general. Actually, I have
Yeah.
this book by Kathleen Russell that's why you should read children's books, even though you are so very old and so very wise, which I just love. I think that books like speak to something important about the lifespan. And yes, they are targeted toward different developmental levels, but um, we're always as adults people who move through those developmental levels, and going back to those things reconnects us with earlier versions of ourselves and reconnects us with young people in our lives. I think it would be sad to think that you could age out of a book category and never go back to it.
Yeah. Because that inner child still lives in all of us, no matter
Yeah,
how old.
yeah.
Yeah, they still need to be soothed sometimes, so these books can do it. So looking at your books as a whole, I know you have another middle grade title, you have two other YA titles. Do you have a particular kind of hope or a particular kind of, just thought of what you hope readers in general will walk away with after reading your books?
I mean, my first job always is I want my books to be joyful experiences. I want them to feel fun and madcap. I like talk about hearing like circus music playing in my head when I'm writing. Like that's what I want, is to give that feeling to people first and foremost. Um, and then like more broadly than that, I think I'm trying to write particularly to teenage girls about how to be a sort of whole, complicated human in the world. I think that's something that was difficult for me growing up, was feeling like I had to pick the one kind of girl I was going to be. Um, and none of that ever felt exactly right. And so I think I mean, all of my books are about like, how do you construct like a more complicated girlhood for yourself?
Mm, that's just perfect. As a girl and as a woman, my goodness, what a gift to be able to start to figure that out and have permission to do
Yeah.
that based on books. And I know that, books have fictional characters, but when you're reading them, they don't feel that way. And sometimes the only mentor you might have in a particular area of your life may be from those fictional characters in books,
Yeah.
and they matter just as much.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Yeah. So are you working on any other books or
I
ideas?
am
Oh,
um I'm working on another middle grade that is a follow-up to this, that is also sort of dealing with our digital world, but wrapping it into a ghost story. So that has been really fun. And then another YA romance.
wow. I like that. Middle grade novel, a little bit of digital, a little bit of ghost.
Yeah, that's
Definitely
right.
appeals to a lot. And I
I feel like
imagine,
in order to have enough like meat there to write a whole book, you kind of need two really different ideas. And so lots of my early playing is like trying to figure out what two things can I put together to make
right,
it a story.
right. I love that because then readers can enter at so many different points of the book and then
Yeah.
dig in and stay there for a while. So, as a one teacher educator to another, I'm wondering, I'm thinking, like, I know that the academic world, I can be pretty academic, right? There's research, there's writing, there's all of the
Hmm.
things. And
Yeah.
this just feels like such a beautiful creative outlet. You have this
Yeah.
smile on your face when you're talking about books as lessons for future teachers to be able to see, again, thinking of that complicated whole human, right? You're showing that you can do both. You can have this academic kind of professorship kind of job. And hey, look, I write really cool books based on One Direction lyrics, and it's all good. So I think you're a beautiful model for the
Thank you.
themes that you're writing about, and that always shines through to the reader and to people who are around you. So I just wanted to say how much I love that you're doing both. You're doing all the things that way.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's not an accident, right, that this is the theme of my books. And I always say, like, the first 10 years I was a professor, I didn't even tell people that I read romance novels or young adult novels, like it was a secret.
Yeah.
And so to go from that to like publicly writing them has been a journey. Yeah, I think it's hard for sometimes people to hold divergent ideas in their head.
Yeah.
They can get better with practice.
Yes. Yes, we absolutely can. So where can listeners find more about you, either online, social media? Where can they buy your books? What's the best place?
You can buy my books anywhere, and if you put my name into a search engine, you will find my website and my Twitter presence and my Instagram presence, which are not significant, but they are there.
I know there's, in thinking of this whole digital privacy and social media, there's just so many places we could be. It's deciding where we want to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, those are all not my favorite things, but
Yeah.
you can't really have a professional career of any kind and not be findable online right now.
Well, it's kind of like the ending of the story we are not revealing.
That's
Media
right.
is not going away, but it's
Nope.
figuring
We
out
have to find
how
out how we're going to do it.
how
Yep.
to live with it. Well, I will put links to your website and those social media handles in the show notes, along with links to your books so that listeners can just click right on it, grab
Lovely.
Averil Offline, whether it's for the child in their life, for themselves, fellow parent group. I know they're gonna love it. I wish you all the best of luck in that
Thank
launch. Now
you.
I think you need it.
Always.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk about your book. I loved our conversation. And for everyone else, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And I'll see you inside the next one on the Kidlit Love podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kidlit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of kid lit love. Thanks for listening.